Hey guys, this is Marc Owings, and I'm your host for the Unbridled Life Podcast, where we have real, raw, and unreligious conversation to encourage and challenge men and women in their daily lives. Well, welcome to the Unbridled Life Podcast. I say it every single time I have a guest on. I have a ton of favorite people, but this is one of the coolest stories, people, connections of what God's done in and through both of us. I want to just introduce my friend John Yeatts. A lot of different factions, filters, connections, things that we've done. But John, just tell us a little bit about yourself, and thanks for coming on the Unbridled Life.
Well, Mark, thank you so much for having me. It's a great honor to get to be with you. And I saw, we were talking earlier, we've actually known each other for 30 years. In 1994, my wife started working in your department for Life Outreach International. We had a great connection then, never dreamed that 10 years later, the Lord would bring me to work actually directly under you. And that was one of the greatest healing times of my life. We were talking about testimonies earlier, and you kind of wanted me to share. There's so much that it's kind of hard to know how to package something like a life of testimony now. Back then, it was so easy. It was just, I was just a drunk and a violent kid that God had a head-on collision with. But, 30 plus years later serving, and you realize it goes so far back and our lives and how we're programmed. And part of what we're going to talk about today is our thought life and how we're programmed to think certain ways. But the bottom line is that I was raised in a very abusive home, and through that, became early drinker, started drinking when I was 8 years old. And I had my first beer by the time I was 12.
You heard him, 8. Yeah.
And I could go on there. There's so many dysfunctional things. We could talk about sexuality, experiencing sexuality stuff at 4 or 5 years old, and just from pornography to different things that just so broken, right? But the fact is, by the time I was 12, I probably could outdrink any man I knew.
And that used to be bragging.
Yeah.
But you look back now and you get none to brag about.
Nothing bragging.
But you said a great word, John. You said dysfunction. And as you look back in that, at 4 or 5, we just, I want you to hear that 4 or 5 of being exposed to pornography, sexuality, all kinds of stuff. I think we could blow people's mind, and I'm not trying to blow people's mind. What I want to do is, you're not as messed up as you think you are. And the couple of podcasts that we're going to do together is we were two broken kids coming out of dysfunction, and dysfunction was cool back then. This is the, late 70s, early 80s, maybe it was mid 80s. I don't do my math that great, but when you said that, relationship, mom, dad, the culture around you, can you sprinkle some more words to that? Dysfunction covers, I want to zoom in a little bit on the lens. What did dysfunction speak to you about you?
Sure. Well, you grow up with a idea about yourself that you're worthless. And that worthlessness begins to be lived out either in some type of insecurity and weakness, which in our family, weakness was absolutely the abomination. There was no weakness allowed, right? And, so you think through that. And so for me, it produced this aggression to actually be made something, or to make something, or become something.
Good word.
And that aggression came out in arrogance and pride, in overachievement, in the things I could do. I was never good in school, wasn't very smart, couldn't read well, had a lot of things that were again dysfunctional in that aspect. But the one thing I could always do is outwork everyone.
Mm-hmm. So good at work ethic.
He was a toxic worth it. To be honest with you.
That's really good.
It was toxic for everyone around me because nobody could outwork. I mean, Mark, when I was 16 years old, I started working literally my first job when I was 12 years old. And when I was 16 years old, I was managing the feed store there in Smithfield, Texas, and I could carry 300 pounds of feed on my shoulders and walk it out to the car. So everybody else is driving dollies. We're in a busy, and I just picked the bags up and carried.
You can't tell. He's a very tall, hard. Like he came in today, and I was just like, John, I forget how tiny I am. And he looks like he just a big guy, so that you could pick up two of me easy.
But it was all about this idea that that's what my value was. That was the only value I brought, was when I could outdo everyone else. And it didn't matter if I was riding broncs. It didn't matter if I was drinking. It didn't matter if I was, courting girls, whatever. Everything was about outdoing somebody else, because inside there was no value to me. And it was from that you begin this whole toxic lifestyle that is going to end up either in jail or dead. And that's really where it came down to. On May the 7th, 1989, the night of my prom, I had rented the honeymoon suite in the Embassy Suites Hotel south of Dallas-Fort Worth Airport. I was 18 years old. And I can remember it like yesterday. And here's the thing, Mark, for most of us, especially here in the South, we grew up with a knowledge of God. I grew up going to church on the church bus. By the time I was 12, I didn't want to have anything to do with it. But every once in a while, when I was rodeoing, I'd either go down to the Cowboy Church in Fort Worth, or I'd go to a church service if if it was got there early enough to rodeo, and just enough of that knowledge of God to keep me from God. And this whole thing came about this is how dysfunctional we can be. I can remember walking in to that hotel, laying my American Express credit card down on the counter of the reservation, saying, God, if you help me get this room tonight, I will buy.
How we get the room? How we get the girl?
I already had the girl.
Yeah.
And it's like, so, literally, this is how broken we can be, is to think God's going to bless that, right? And the reality is God's grieved over us and for us that we can be so deceived. And it goes back to the way we're programmed as a kid. But the fact is, fast forward all these years, May the 7th, 1989, picked my girlfriend up. We were fighting. There were so many things going on. That whole last half of the year, it flunked out. I couldn't ride for them in the rodeo circuit for the high school anymore. So I was just doing everything odds everywhere you could go with. And I was despairing of life. I was to that place where I was done. And
How old are you? 18? Okay.
18 years old, just turned 18. And Mark, I can remember, I got the room, immediately went out, spent $200 on booze, Crowd Roll, Jim Beam, Grey Goose, all this stuff. For what? It was just me and her in the room. Wasn't like I was throwing a party with everybody, but that's how broken we are. I just told God the bar.
Filled the part.
Just told God I wasn't going to buy it if I got the room. I got the room, and the first place I went to was to a liquor store.
I understand.
She's beautiful. I'm stupid. All I'm thinking about is sex and all that kind of stuff. And then the whole night is just tension and problems. It's supposed to be one of the funnest nights in your high school life, and it's nothing but a chaos. And, we leave and go back to the hotel. We're fighting, and I pass out drunk on the bed. And at 4:54 in the morning, I felt this weight. The hand of God pressed me to the bed. And Mark, I could not get up out of the bed, but I was stone cold sober. And I can still see, you remember those little LED light clocks, little red?
Oh, yeah.
Beside the bed. 4:54 in the morning. I can see it like I was standing there right now. And I heard the Lord spoke to me. He said, "You don't know me." And my response was, "I'll give you today." Today. My brother and my cousin had gotten born again 2 years earlier. They had been inviting me to church. I didn't want to go. Didn't want to have anything to do with organized religion, any of that kind of stuff. But they kept after me, and I got up that morning. And laying there looking at that clock and everything spinning through my world, the relationship with her that had just been destroying, been toxic and all kinds of brokenness there. And, you know, as a little kid, I had this dream of being a veterinarian and realizing there's no chance in the world it's ever going to happen. And, you know, all of these things that I'm just spinning, I'm reliving the abuse of my life that I just despairing of life. Told the Lord, I said, I'll give you today. At 6 o'clock in the morning, I got up out of the bed. She's still sleeping. And I went downstairs, got on one of them old payphones. You had to put the quarter in the, you know, that's how far back we're going, right? Called my cousin, woke him up and said, Daryl, I said, you've been asking me to come to church. I said, is that invitation still?
Wow. Very cool.
There was this pause and he said, are you serious? I said, yeah. He said, be here at a certain time. I walked back upstairs, told the girl, I said, I'm going to church with my brother and my cousin today. You can go with us if you want. No, I'll drop you off at the house. And she just looked at me like I had 4 eyes and 2 heads. You know, but
she has no idea what's going on.
No idea. And literally that morning I went to church. I don't remember what the guy preached on, could care less. My brother and my cousin set this environment with all their friends at the church where we're went back to their apartment, had a pool party, and I'm sitting off in the corner of this pool and watching all these people. And I'm just seeing them laughing and joking and having a good time, and everything in me is just completely broken, and there's no joy, there's no laughter. And long story short, stayed all day. Went back to church that night. They were having a testimony service, you know, and nothing to me, talking about the Holy Spirit. I was been speaking about French. I had no idea what he was talking about. But here's the deal. My brother was raised the same way I was, in the same dysfunction and broken. My cousin was raised the same way. But I saw something different in him.
And got out.
And I literally stood up and I said, I don't know what y'all are talking about. But what I know is my brother and my cousin are changed, and whatever that is, I have to have it. Because I knew if I left that church that night, it was over. And that's the catalyst to now 35 years of serving Jesus, him giving me the most precious, beautiful family I could ever imagine. And here's something that's so crazy, Mark. I can remember, the Lord brought this back to me not long ago. When I was about 10 years old, I always had really wealthy friends for some reason. And one of them had a huge ranch that every year their family would go to off and on. And everybody go spring break, and they invited me to go. And was waiting on them, and they never picked me up. And I remember standing on the curb of my street there in Richland Hills, walking back and forth, waiting. Sun went down. It's dark outside, and I'm still walking. I'm still hoping they'll show up. And I can remember, even though I didn't really know God, but I knew about him, as I think it was 9 or 10 years old, I said, Lord, all I want is a family of mom.
God, we got so many similarities. That was a dream in your heart. You knew in the dysfunction you wanted family and you wanted something different, but you don't have the words or the language to say it. But God saw your heart. And, you know, if you're on YouTube right now, you'll see his beautiful family. And just, it's crazy how many similarities we have. Because, growing up, I understand the dysfunction. And I can hear someone saying this just in their mind, like, man, he was only 18. He couldn't have lifted up. When you start at 4 or 5, you can't comprehend how much life you can live or how much brokenness you can consume. And you don't know it. You're consuming this cancer that's devouring you, that gets you in a moment. And man, you brought back so many memories. I remember praying to God. It wasn't really prayer like I know it now, a conversation or relationship. It was like, I didn't even say to the Lord, it's God, just let me score this deal.
Mm-hmm.
And talking about dope, or let me score this girl, talking about sex. And I literally gave him credit for it. thank you. I got her. I got the deal. I got the dope. But when you have no context of who he is yet, and you said something, you're in a bedroom, and I want you to explain just a little more on this. And then you're laying in this bed at 454, and something presses you down. Was it a weight? Did it feel heavy?
I feel like it was the hands of God literally pressing me to the bed. I think if I had heard him speak without him holding me, I would have got him and ran away, right? And I can't explain it. I know people, for some, it's just kind of out there, but I know what I know. I know what I experienced. I could not move, Mark. I was laying on my right side. She's laying behind me. The clock's in front of me, right? And I cannot move. I am wide awake. I passed out drunk 2 or 3 hours earlier. And most people don't wake up.
No, it was over that quick.
Boom, breast of the bed, stone cold sober. And I heard him speak. And then every part of my life just starts running through.
Is it possible, looking back, just like I think about a child, that would run out the road or run into danger, sometimes you got to put you got to just hold them in tight.
Yeah.
Is it possible that was God just holding you, and he might have been part of the bed at that point, wrapping you and pressing that? Did you feel condemned?
I just knew in his words, I don't think even a frame of reference of feeling at that point.
Okay.
It was not a condemnation, but it was a correction. You don't know me. And right. And again, growing up in the South, you have a little bit of knowledge of God to know that knowing God means you go to heaven and not knowing God means you go to hell. And I knew that I don't know him. I'm destined for hell. And the reality was, Mark, I didn't care. By the end of that night, if he hadn't rescued me, it would have been over. I'd already planned how to do it. And I'm not one that goes around talking about it all the time. And I wasn't some kid back then threatening to commit suicide. It's just the bottom line, I'd had enough.
You worn out?
I was rowing
hard and put up with.
At 18 years old. And you're to this place that you're like, but again, fast forward, Mark, from that to now to the miracles that we both experienced in our whole life. And even what we want to ultimately talk today about this rest that comes from the presence of God, this restoration of our soul, our mind, and our body that comes through the presence of God, right? And so we're sitting here, and that night I give my life to Christ. 35 years later, I've never looked back. People thought I lost my mind. I lost every relationship. Friend, girlfriend, families that had taken me in. There were 2 families that had pretty much taken me in, and if it hadn't been for them, it would have probably ended sooner, right? My whole life would have ended sooner. But those 2 families were like anchors. They were the kind of the picture in the distance that God was showing me. We're not even realizing it. That's what I want versus what I've lived. And so there was this drops of inspiration that God would place into my life to give me an idea of where ultimately he would bring me. And I think it, like you said, it's not even really a prayer, but it's a cry of your heart. There's something in us. We're created in the image of God. We're created with this knowledge of God. And I think as the younger we are, the more pure it is. And so we can even have the ideas and conversations with God without knowing him. And the older we get, we rationalize that he's not real or doesn't care or whatever, he's cruel or all these things. And so he sprinkled these inspirations into my life. But when I decided to serve him, they all left, everyone. And it was just me and him. And Mark, I'll be honest with you, for the first 5 years outside of my brother and my cousin, I went off to Bible college just 6 months later. And how that...
Dude, you graduated high school, then you go to Bible college. Did you finish Bible college?
I did.
I'm so proud of you. I did finish either one of them.
Yeah, it's People talk about graduating high school in the top 10%. I graduated in the bottom 2%.
Well, I knew I wasn't going to make the 2%, so I just dropped out 3 months before I graduated. But it's comical because what I asked John and I were just going to do a 1-part series. And part of the vision at the Unbridled Life is for you to hear testimonies. What was and what is, and who did that. And so before he gets sharing, because John has taught me a lot. I remember we were working together, and we'll get into that. But, I didn't want anything to do with theology or doctrine. And I remember right where we were, and you said, Mark, you don't know, but you do have a theology and you do have a doctrine. And I said, no, I don't. No, I don't. I don't want any part of that. And I was dead wrong. And you brought that to my mind. It took years for that to realize you can be lost. We had a doctrine and a theology about God when we were lost.
Mm-hmm.
It was wrong.
Yeah.
It was misplaced. It was dysfunctional, and it's a great word. So I just wanted you to be able to hear John Yeatts' story. He's married, he's got kids. Part 2 will come, so join us again. And so, John, thanks for being on the Unbridled Life. Share your story, your testimony, and I can't wait for part 2 that we'll actually take today and they'll hear as they go along in their story. So if you're listening to this and you're out there, I want John to have last words on Unbridled Life. If you're out there driving, and I always picture this, someone driving down the road. Man, I feel what he just described, except I haven't been held. I haven't heard God's voice. And I don't even know if he loves me, much less likes me. I just want John to be able to look into the camera and speak to people that are out there that might be hearing this. Maybe they're a college student. Maybe they're a high school student. Maybe they're a married couple. Maybe they feel like they've lost that connection and how to get that back. What would be your encouraging words and accompanying words to those people listening right now? How hard is it, and what do you do, and what's the first step look like?
And it is the greatest decision you'll ever make in your life is to surrender. And that's the easiest and the most difficult thing you'll ever do, because the fact is you can't fix this. But that cry that you have, that wanting something better, I can tell you 35 years later, there is something better, and it is available to you. If he did it for me, he wants to do it for you. The fact that you're listening to this podcast is a demonstration that he is working in your life. And so, friend, listen, reach out to Mark, reach out to me. Our information will be available. We're here to encourage you however we can, to admonish you. But you're right. There has to be something more to this life than what you're living.
Come on.
And there is. And I'm testimony. I am proof of that. And Mark is proof of that. And there are myriads of other people with myriads of other stories. And whatever your story is, there's someone who's made this decision, who's now living their best life, who had the same kind of story you do. It doesn't matter what your story was. It matters about what your story can be in the hands of a God who loves you. You say, well, how could he love me? Well, he made you. And because he made you, you're his. Mm-hmm. He wants to redeem what's been taken, what's been broken. And he's already declared how much he loves you and your value to him because he was willing to go to the cross for you. I want you to think about that for a minute. If you're asking, what good am I? You're good enough for the God of all creation to hang on a cross and give his life through his son for you. I don't know anybody else that would have done that for me, Mark. Nobody loved me enough to do that. Mm. And part of what we'll talk about is for years, even after that, I never felt loved. Felt. That's the operative word. Mm-hmm. The reality was I was loved. But I never felt loved outside of what I could produce. Mm. And what I'm telling you 35 years later is you can't produce enough to be valuable enough to God. It's based upon the fact that he looked on you and he formed you and he created you, and he's got a plan for you and he's got a destiny for you. And right now you're watching this because he is speaking to you. There is a better way. And I invite you to find it.
So if you need prayer or you need to reach out, you can write to us at prayer@elevatehim.com. We'll call you. We'll pray with you. We have intercessors. We want to help you in this journey because someone helped us. Yeah, there was a cousin, there was a brother. In my case, it was my cousin, and that was the only Christian. I grew up in the South. My story's completely different. I never really heard God or Jesus, and I was confused by it. But I also want you to realize that maybe you drive down the road, you're a man, woman, child. I don't know. You're thinking, well, I'm not drinking, I'm not passing out, I'm not doing this, but I feel and I connect with John in this. I feel like I'm being rode hard and put up wet. Your poison may look different than John and I's, but poison's poison. It's just a different label. What I want you to experience is what many called and said to me was the abundant life. And it's a scripture. Who cares right now? The abundant life for you would, that depression, that oppression, those feelings can slowly move as you surrender into a relationship with Jesus. It's not just giving your heart to Jesus. It's entering in a relationship, a friendship that he talks to us, he walks with us. And this friend will not leave you or forsake you. He's unlike he makes everyone else, pair in comparison, even my wife and children. His commitment to me is unparalleled. His commitment to John is unparalleled to Rhonda's commitment or his children's commitment to him. He wants to commit that to you now. And it simply starts with a prayer from your heart, asking him to start walking with you and talking with you. We talk about praying and asking him to come into your heart. Really, it's so much simpler than that. It's just asking him, hey, I'd like to be friends and I'd like to acknowledge who you are and where I am. Could you enter in and can we start this conversation? So if you're listening today, we're praying for you. We love you. We bless you. Thanks for listening to us at the Unbridled Life, and listen to the outro.
Thanks so much for listening to the Unbridled Life Podcast. We know your time is valuable, and we hope we bring real and relevant content that helps you live that unbridled life. If you want to help us spread the message, you can rate or review the podcast on whatever platform you like to listen to us and share it with a friend or two. If you want to know more about who we are and what we're doing, head on over to theunbridledlifepodcast.com and learn more.